Okay, so I got my little pliers here. I'm going to try not shoot this thing across the room. Let's see if we can... Yay, got it off and didn't shoot it across the room. And let's see if it comes apart. Now it's starting to. Okay, after a little bit of using the old persuader hammer, I got the splined CV joint off. There's my axle. It has two boots on it, but now the boots can be removed and replaced with, hopefully, Porsche 930 turbo boots, and it'll be put back together again. Okay, after much spraying with Void Cleaner, I actually have it pretty much cleaned out. Now when you start playing with it, you'll find it comes apart in your hands. So what I had actually done before I popped that circlip off, and you won't be able to see it, but I made a very fine mark with a file there on the ring and on the spline piece here. And thank heavens I did, because boy, once it comes apart, you can't figure out how the hell it goes back together again, because the ball channels are going in different directions. For what it's worth, when you get it done, the little raised edge is on the side that the CV boot goes on, and the other side is a smooth edge, but I advise you to make marks, otherwise it's very hard to get it back together again. Okay, now that you've cleaned all the grease out, it's time to put the grease in. The way I got it's in these little packets of CV boot grease. I presume it's one packet per CV joint, but it didn't seem like that much in there, so I'm going to do 1.5 packs per CV joint. And the first pack I put in and squished and squished and squished with my fingers, and hopefully it's going to do the job. And I was wondering why the grease was so black when I was cleaning it out of the CV joint before, and it's like, well, it's because it comes black. So, there you go. So, tons of grease now. Okay, finally got my boot on. I used a metal S-hook here, but I tried not to have the point poking up. I just sort of held it in a plane with the lip here and worked it from side to side and finally got it on. I mean, obviously you don't want to puncture your new boot with the tip there. Okay, there's a bunch of ways you can attach these things, but I'm going to try and do it properly with the real bands here. Basically you wrap them around, and there's a little hook on this that grabs into a notch there. So you try and get it as tight as you can by hand and get the hook into the notch. And that leaves you with this raised thing, which for like 38 bucks or something, you buy the fancy tool to crimp it, which will tighten it and hopefully make it stay in place. Now, I haven't tried this before, so I got some extra bands in case I screw it up, but we will give this a shot and see what happens. Okay. Okay. Seems to be crimped on there. Okay, so I have the big band on, and we will try crimping this one also. And there it is. And then I just sort of flatten the little nub out with a hammer. And we should be good to go. I should mention that these are the Porsche 930 boots, years 1978 to 80, I think, will do it. Interestingly, when I was looking them up, apparently Porsche or Toyota Tundras have problems with their CV boots because they make them so thick to tolerate sand in the desert and stuff like that, when it gets to be winter time, the super thick boots are prone to cracking. So apparently a lot of Tundra owners switch to Porsche 930 boots. So it's a popular boot for things other than Porsche 930s. Okay, so after I got both of my clamps on, I realized that there's actually little indentations in the axle where this is supposed to go, because I looked at the other half shaft from the other side that's still intact. So thank heavens I had a spare clamp, because I figured I'd screw this up. So I took the clamp off, moved this down to where the indentation is, and now I'm going to put my clamp there, and then it will hopefully be proper. Okay, now obviously you need to put the other boot on before you start attaching the inner CV joint. I found the boot was tough getting across the little ridge here in the axle, so I wrapped a little electrical tape around it to get it on for the other one. So this one I'm doing electrical tape all the way up and over, because these are kind of harsh edges and I don't want to damage my boot. The other thing I'm doing this time is I'm soaking the boot in fairly warm water to see if that'll soften it up and make it a little easier to get on. The good news is that this one's a lot easier to pack because you have access to both sides, so it's not as much poking with your finger to get it all in like it is on the other one. So all I have to do is slip it over the splines of the half shaft and put the circlip on, and then get the boot on. To get the stupid cap back on, I actually put some of the bolts in just to make sure the holes were lined up, because I didn't want to have all this installed then try and bolt it onto the flange on the transmission case and find out it was off by a couple millimeters. So now I'm just tapping it on with a rubber hammer, and we should be good to go there. Okay, it's on. Okay, I got the big band on, which is nothing new here now, but the important point here is make sure the little nubby thing someone pointed out on Ferrari Chat at some point, make sure that that's not obstructing the bolt holes when you're trying to get the bolts through there, so make sure it's in between the holes. Okay, after some cussing and struggling and very greasy hands and grease everywhere else, the half shaft is done and ready to install. For what it's worth, I used a little jack to try and maneuver the hub carrier up and down to get all these bolts back into place, especially the one for the end of the tie rod, that, or the end of the extension for the sway bar that goes down there. I had to, after I got all the other bolts in, I had to jack the hub up to get that to line up, and then put all my nuts and everything on, and obviously the axle is through with this just loosely placed on, and now I'm going to work on the bolts way in the back there. So I threaded these in by hand, and now I'm just tightening them with a ratchet wrench because I want to blow them on and find out that things were cross-threaded or something like that. So I'm doing it slow and gently here. On the old "as long as you're in there" routine, I had noticed my handbrake was actually holding better on the left rear wheel than this wheel. So as long as I was in here, I adjusted my little star wheel here to expand the pads a couple notches, check the handbrake, and it seems to work well. Much better than it was before. So now I can put my rotor on and put my little pins in, and it'll be a-okay. Okay, this is probably the school of the obvious, but after all the grease and greasy hands all over the rotor, make sure you clean your rotors real carefully with some brake cleaner. And I'm also going to hose the pads off and wipe them off just to make sure they're not contaminated with grease.